it is a 10x and sometimes 15x performance improvement over the existing Sunday V1. Just to put it in perspective, the most number of swaps that have ever executed on Cardano in a single day, I believe, and I'm getting these numbers from Dex Hunter, so I haven't checked them for myself, but I believe is somewhere between 20 and 25,000 swaps per day in a single day. When we launched our preview testnet, we had a kind of what's called a soak test running, which is we put the system under strain for a long period of time. And we had it artificially capped because we didn't want to kind of leak this secret that we can do 35 orders. So we had it artificially capped at 20 orders per batch. And even with that cap, we were pushing 30 to 40,000 orders per day.
What's up, Ada Nation? Welcome to Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. My name is Fareed. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with the founder of Sundaeswap, one of the first AMM-style protocols to launch here on the Cardano network. Now, they just released Sundaeswap v3, and I want to talk about all of its brand new features, and I also want to get some insights as to upcoming features outside of just the Sunday v3 platform. So, without any further ado, let me go ahead and bring up the founder, Pi Lanningham, before we jump into everything Sunday. Pi, welcome aboard. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me on the channel.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I think this has been long overdue. I recall my introduction to Cardano through Sundaeswap. This was, I think, January 22nd of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was January 21st. And I just remember, watching so many videos, finally getting access to the first AMM style protocol here in Cardano. And since then, it's been history. So welcome to the channel. It's, again, been overdue. But let's just kind of kick things off here with a little bit of background surrounding yourself and what Sundaeswap is. And then we're going to just dive right on into all the brand new features coming in with Sundaeswap v3.
Sure. So my name is Pi. I'm the CTO at Sunday Labs, and we were the first AMM style DEX, like you said. You said, it's been history since. It's been a bit rocky, right? So we had some drama around our launch, and we've kind of powered through that. And a lot of that was outside of our control. Some of it was in our control. So we've worked to make things better where we can. And really excited about these new V3 contracts because I think they solve a lot of the problems that we learned, from our launch and from the operation of the Sunday protocol.
Thank you for that. Let's just go ahead and just dive right on in. For anybody who hasn't heard of Sundaeswap, what is Sundaeswap and what is V3 bringing? I know that this was just released about a week or two ago on the preview testnet. Can you give us a little bit of a glimpse into that? And then we're going to jump into all the different types of features and enhancements that come along with V3.
Yeah, so Sundaeswap is a DEX, an AMM style DEX, and Sunday V3 is our first chance to kind of update the contracts of that protocol since the launch of Sunday V1. You may ask, what happened to Sunday V2? And there's kind of two reasons why we decided to go just straight to Sunday V3. One was we did a complete redesign of our UI about a year ago, and we marketed that as the Sunday V2 UI. And then people got confused when we talked about doing the Sunday V2 contracts. And then also we did an internal implementation using Plutus TX, and that wasn't really working out. And so we decided to rewrite them again in in Aiken, and we're just calling that Sunday V3. We really tried to strike a balance between what features can we include to kind of set up the Sunday protocol for success over the next 2 years, because one of the challenges of building in blockchain is how immutable things are and how you kind of have to those protocols are forever. And so we wanted to include a bunch of features that were going to be well positioned for this upcoming bull market that we're all hoping for, without kind of just continuing to iterate on it and refine it forever. So like you said, we launched the V3 version of Sundaeswap on I think maybe last week or the week before. Time is kind of an illusion lately. And you've pulled that up there, and we're really excited about it. And there are kind of a couple of big key theme areas that we wanted to focus on. So the first is scalability. So you can see there we say lightning fast speed, and I'm happy to reveal today, we've been telling people, hey, we were able to fit 25 orders per batch, which is already a huge accomplishment. So for comparison, our V1 orders or our V1 protocol can fit, maybe 4 orders per batch, just because of kind of a couple awkward nuances of how the Cardano blockchain works. But these new contracts we've been saying they can fit 25. We believe in always keeping a bullet in the chamber. So happy to announce today that that's actually 35. So we can fit 35 orders per batch, which I believe when I run the numbers matches Uniswap's output or beats Uniswap's output. So really, really excited about that. The next big theme that we're focusing on, and these won't exactly line up with what's here on the page that you're showing, but the next big theme that we're focused on is extensibility. So we really want to be able to compose with, or we really want to be able to extend this protocol long after this, right? So one of the most painful things over the last 2 years has been how locked in we were to the design that we made 2 years ago when we understood less about what the market needed, right? And so we've really put a lot of thought into, if we need to replace components of this, how would we do so, and how would we allow that to happen kind of with the will of the DAO in mind. So for example, we can add new pool contracts so that we have different types of pools, not just the basic AMM pool. We can add new order types so that we have extra conditions and logic protecting and guarding your order and when it can execute. The next big theme that we focused on is interoperability. So we really want Sunday to become a tool in other protocol builders' toolbox, right? So if they need access to price data or the ability to swap or things like that, they can really reach for Sunday and build their protocol to interoperate with Sunday. And we'll go through kind of each of the features that play to these themes in a second. The next big one is programmability and kind of dynamism. So the ability to have dynamic and reactive orders. And we'll talk about how we achieve that in a bit. Next up is usability. So there's a whole bunch of features that we looked at. Where are the pain points that the Cardano ecosystem is facing today with all of the dexes, and how can we solve those features? And then finally is governability. So we really wanted to set this up to be a DAO-owned protocol. Sunday V1 is largely a DAO-owned protocol, but there are still some ways in which it is dependent on either the scoopers or Sunday Labs. And so we really focused on, one, building in protocol revenue streams so that the protocol can be collecting revenue from the activity that happens on the DEX. And two, DAO-driven administration. So like different administrative roles, like a Treasury administrator that is elected by, and then maybe even eventually completely governed by the DAO. So that's a lot. Before I get into the specific features, do you have any questions?
No specific questions just yet, but I do want to just quickly highlight one of the biggest things that you mentioned was just the throughput, right?
Mm-hmm.
To hear how big of an improvement that is, that almost sounds like, near 10x, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, I think incredible, given the short amount of time that Cardano's been around, but then also just with the complexity that it takes to build here on Cardano, right? So I want to commend you guys for that. I have seen you in the past doing demos in person at different events, but then even with just other content creators, beginning to show the impact from a throughput standpoint that the new versions of Sundaeswap will have, which I think are going to be a brand new breath of fresh air that is much needed in this space. I think that's kind of been one of the biggest things that people have issues with when interacting with Cardano for the very first time, is just the amount of time that it takes for things to finally settle or be finalized on the blockchain. So it sounds like with Sundaeswap v3, that was one of the main focuses you guys had. And I'm really happy to hear about those updates that have been made. Now, you also touched on composability, interoperability, programmability, and governability. Seems like a lot there. Now, just before this call,
abilities.
Yes, a lot of abilities, but it's good. It's good. I think Cardano needs this. So what I want to do next is let's just jump into each of those features that comes with each of these different categories.
Sure.
So let's kick things off with the market open. You know, did you want to go and maybe start somewhere else?
Yeah, well, just you know, you brought up a really good point about the scalability and the kind of throughput. So I just wanted to kind of comment on that a little bit more. Yeah, it is a 10x and sometimes 15x performance improvement over the existing Sunday V1. You know, just to put it in perspective, the most number of swaps that have ever executed on Cardano in a single day, I believe, and I'm getting these numbers from Dex Hunter, so I haven't checked them for myself, but I believe is somewhere between 20 and 25,000 swaps per day in a single day. When we launched our preview testnet, we had a kind of what's called a soak test running, which is we put the system under strain for a long period of time. And we had it artificially capped because we didn't want to kind of leak this secret that we can do 35 orders. So we had it artificially capped at 20 orders per batch. And even with that cap, we were pushing 30 to 40,000 orders per day. So, you know, you can imagine if, I think most often this will translate into cheaper fees for everyone, right? Because we just don't have that volume right now of needing to process, you know, 75 to 100,000 orders per day. But if we ever do hit that kind of crunch, Sunday Labs will be, or the Sunday protocol will be able to handle quite a bit of load, right? So to put it in comparison, our mainnet launch, if you add up all the orders that were placed there, some people experienced a 9-day delay in getting their order executed, which is insane. It's abysmal. I hate that happened. If we experienced that same load today, this would have a maximum delay of like half an hour, which both one highlights the scalability that we've gone through to improve and optimize these contracts, and two, highlights how intense and insane our launch, the hype around our launch was. So yeah, I just want to kind of dwell on that for a second and go into them. So yeah, let's dive into some of the features that kind of play into those themes that I went over. So the first is this notion of a market open. So one thing we've observed in the market is that as soon as a pool is created, someone can swap against it. So there's two kind of bad things that come out of that. One, if a project is trying to launch their token on multiple dexes, then what can happen is they create it on one dex, somebody grabs the tokens and then, creates it on another before they get there, sets a weird price, and, the community is really excited to get that token. And so they do 100% slippage swap and get absolutely wrecked. And so that's one kind of bad effect from that we've observed. The other is this kind of whole notion around sniper bots, right? So when there's a highly anticipated token launch, there's these bots out there that are trying to kind of catch when the pool gets created and immediately swap against it so they get the best price because they're expecting it to kind of skyrocket. And that, upsets a lot of people and things like that. So what we have done instead is when you create the pool, it's pretty simple. You can specify when trading is allowed to begin. And so people can place their orders well ahead of that. So you might say, we're launching next Thursday, and everybody can place their orders and their limit prices and all of that. And then when the market opens, the scoopers process those orders, the ones that were placed before the market open, in a random order, so that nobody has a first come first serve bias. And we just process them in a random order. Then once we've burned down that kind of initial backlog, we process pool orders that were placed after the pool open in a first come first serve basis. And this really solves both of those problems, because now you can create your pool on Sunday and schedule it to go live at a specific time, and then go and at that time create your pools on another DEX, right? And we hope that other DEXs adopt this feature, because we think it really helps protect the consumer. And two, it allows a lot more of a fair launch without having to resort. I've seen people suggesting like, oh, we're going to create decoy tokens and we're going to do a stealth launch. And really those are just kind of an arms race with these sniper bots, and not actually solving the problem directly. So we're really, it's a small thing, but we think it's really important to the usability of the Cardano protocol, or of the Sundaeswap protocol.
Thank you for that, Pi. With respect to just the market open feature, right? This reminds me of the traditional markets where if I don't have access to trade after hours, right, I can place my order at midnight. As soon as the market opens the following morning, it's then executed. And, if I dictate that I want to just execute my order at market price, right at 8 a.m., right when the market opens, I have my order filled. So I think I can definitely see the use and just the benefit with this. And as you mentioned, with extremely overhyped meme coins, or as you mentioned, some of these stealth launches, this is a way to combat the issue with fairness, making sure that everybody's able to get in on a particular token at the same exact time. One question I have for you, and you actually kind of touched on it towards the very end, was being able to implement this market feature or this market open feature on other DEXs. Because again, it's beneficial for Sunday if I want to open up my pool first on Sunday, set the time for it to open, and then go and make another pool somewhere else. But like in the event that I have, for example, 3 DEXs that I want to utilize, I'll start off on Sunday, create my market open time. I'll then have to go to second DEX. But then by the time that I open it up on the second DEX, if they don't have the market open feature, by the time I go to the third DEX, then somebody could potentially take advantage, of that time between the last 2 DEXs where I created my liquidity pools there. So my question to you is, will the actual market open code be open sourced, or is Sundaeswap going to be willing to work with other DEXs to help them also implement a very similar market open feature to make sure that's implemented the same way? That way it's not like, when I go to Sundaeswap to do a market open, I have to do it this way. But then when I go to another DEX, I have to do it another way. That way, again, it's somewhat of a standardized sort of process moving forward.
Yeah, so we're more than happy. So our V3 contracts will be open source, if not today, very soon. So yes, happy to open source all of that, and happy to work with other DEXs. It's a fairly simple feature, so I'm sure I have full faith in the competence of other DEX teams. They've built really cool products. And so I'm sure they'll be able to handle it without me, right? But if anybody does want to talk about maybe standardizing the format of the datum or anything like that, I'm happy to chat. Cool. So the next feature that kind of fits into this usability bucket, it's just a pattern that we've observed, a need that we think the market has that we're trying to solve with these contracts. And also for those following along, we're kind of going from the simplest features to the most complex. So some of the maybe juicier bits, the more exciting things will be at the end. It's not all just like very simple tidbits like this. We just thought I'd get these out of the way. So the next kind of big feature is this notion of fee decay. So when you open the pool, you actually can specify an initial fee and a final fee. And then you specify a length of time, right? And so you say, okay, over the first week, I want it to gradually shift from the initial fee to the final fee. An example of this is when Optim launched their token, they initially created the pool with a 20% fee to kind of dissuade those early market dumpers and build up protocol-owned liquidity. And then over time, they stepped that down to, I think right now they're at a 5% fee. And so you could set up, instead of having to like pull the liquidity out of the pool and put it in a different one, you can just set up a gradual decay of that fee. And so you could decay from 20% to 1% over the course of 2 weeks, for example, if you wanted to. And so we think this, again, just allows tokens to like projects to launch their token in the way that kind of best fits their tokenomics and their goals as a project. Similar to this, and I haven't, this is a new feature that we've added just very recently, actually, so I don't even have it in our marketing materials, is we're adding the ability to specify a fee manager in the pool. So this is kind of in a similar vein. The fee manager is either a public key or a multi-sig or a script that is allowed to update the fees attached to a pool. And so you can use this to build, like, somebody is just managing the pool in reaction to market conditions. So if it's highly volatile, they may increase the fee. And if it's unvolatile, they may decrease the fee. You have to put a lot of thought into how you present this on the UI so the user always knows what fee they'll be paying and things like that. Yeah, that's you could also tie that to a script. So the script can say, hey, this is programmatically driven based on a volatility oracle, for example. And then when volatility goes up, you can increase the fees. And when volatility goes down, you can decrease the fees. So just two features related to kind of managing the fees and making the most efficient DEX and attract the most liquidity that that we provide.
Yeah, thank you for both of those. As you just mentioned, we didn't discuss the fee manager earlier, but I think, again, that plays into just giving more features and more power back to the users. And to hear that, you could have a script programmatically update the fees based off of some other condition, I think is a huge feature set that is yet to be done anywhere else, at least to my knowledge. Now, I do have a quick question surrounding the first feature that we talked about, which was the fee decay.
Yeah.
With something like the fee decay, does that have to happen on a linear sort of scale? Is there maybe a way for somebody to have a bigger drop off in the fees early on, and then it kind of slows down towards the end, more of like a parabolic or parabola, if that makes sense, approach? How programmable is the actual fee decay?
Yeah, so the fee decay that we're launching with is kind of the simplest thing we could implement to have the lowest impact on our delivery timeline. You could definitely implement something like what you're talking about with the fee manager feature, where the fee manager is just updating it kind of pretty regularly. We can extend with new pool types that have more complex fee curves if there's a demand for it, right? So that's really where the extensibility of being able to have a whole new pool type, and we've got a couple planned, but that's a really interesting idea for a whole new pool type that if somebody really wants that the DAO could vote on to support and all that. Yeah, that's a really great idea.
No, thank you for answering. Let's move over, I think, to the next feature, right, which is just surrounding LP tokens. I know that I've had a fair share within my wallet. They really haven't been user-friendly. There's a bunch of zeros and decimals all over the place. No icons. Give us a little bit of the rundown surrounding that update.
Yeah, so basically we've made the LP tokens CIP-68 compatible assets. And so that means that we can attach a logo, a user-friendly name, and even assign decimal places to them. And so, the LP tokens for Sunday V1 or for several other DEXs have these really inscrutable names. For Sunday, it's LP followed by some random symbols. For other DEXs, it's just like a whole big string of random symbols. And so, that we get a lot of questions in our Discord of like, what are these tokens? Like, what are they used for, etc. So we really wanted to be able to attach a logo, attach like a name. So instead of LP blah, it says, the ADA Sunday liquidity tokens, and things like that. And then even, it's really interesting if you set the decimal places, you can get a rough approximation for how much liquidity that those LP tokens represent. It's never going to be exact, but for example, if you have 200 LP token, 200.005 LP tokens in your wallet with the decimal places set correctly, that tells you that, like, okay, this is LP tokens for in the hundreds of ADA, not the 10,000s of ADA, right? So it gives you a rough sense of the scale of what those LP tokens are worth. And then we can even attach like a URL that links to a user guide of like, if you don't know what this token is, click this and it will tell you, it's a how-to guide. So we're not the first to kind of have this idea. I think it was Wing Riders that first registered their LP tokens with the Cardano token registry. But to my knowledge, we are the first to make them CIP-68 assets, and the metadata is put under the control of the DAO. So if there's a really popular pool that wants a custom logo, the DAO can, at first they elect an administrator. And so that administrator is in control of that metadata. But that administrator can be a script. And so in the long term, we can update it to be a script so that, in order to update it, it requires a full DAO vote, for example.
Thank you for that. Not too many comments or things that I want to add with respect to the LP tokens themselves or that upgrade. I think that's very understandable. I think you broke that down very well. But maybe let's take a second just to talk a little bit about farming. With respect to Sundaeswap v3. When you have these LP tokens, is there any new features or builds that we're going to have or upgrades that we're going to have with v3 that we didn't have in prior versions with respect to yield farming and staking the LP tokens themselves?
So right away, no. Sunday v3 or Sunday yield farming just underwent a redesign kind of last summer. And so that is now a community-driven process where everybody votes on which pools they want to receive. We do plan on making a proposal to the DAO so that maybe 30 days after v3 launches, only Sunday v3 pools are eligible for yield farming to kind of help incentivize the liquidity to migrate. But it'll ultimately be up to the DAO for how that evolves. And then we are open to other features, but it's a largely DAO-driven process. So we don't anticipate any major changes to that right away.
Okay, let's keep the conversation rolling into the protocol treasury. Over to you, Pi.
Yeah, so in Sunday v1, we the protocol collects 2.5 ADA and pays that into a smart contract that can be redeemed by the scoopers. The idea was that, okay, there's this 5-week time delay, and if they their scooper status hasn't been revoked in that time, then we can then they can claim that. It turns out this has been really inefficient, and one of the main reasons we can't lower the scooper fees, because you have these like tens of thousands of UTXOs, and you have to go and claim each one of them. And so they each contain a couple ADA. And so by the time you've claimed all of them, you've taken a 20% or more haircut on the fees that you've earned as a scooper. And running a scooper is not cheap. And so, we've wanted to lower the scooper fees for a while, but, it would be really unfair to the scoopers to do so. And so what we did when we went to design Sunday v3 is we said, let's scrap that whole system and let's rethink how that works. And so now we have this notion of a protocol treasury. And so those fees that you pay, which are going to be much lower, and we can talk about that in a second, are collected into the pool itself. And so every liquidity pool will have kind of 3 pots of money. One will be whatever the token A that's being traded. The second will be whatever token B is being traded. So that might be ADA and Sunday. And then there's a third allocation, which is the protocol fees that have been collected. And so that will just accumulate in the pool over time. And so then once it has maybe 10,000 ADA, it can be withdrawn into a smart contract that is governed by the DAO. Exactly what provider we use for that smart contract is still up in the air. I know Clarity DAO plans to make a proposal to use them. That may also, Summon DAO or Agora, or Clarity DAO is built on Agora, but basically the DAO is going to decide where do we want to trust that protocol revenue. And then they can vote on how to use that, right? Oh, let's vote to institute an incentive program to buy back Sunday, or let's vote to do an incentive program to distribute ADA to Sunday token holders, right? And so with that, we also thought about what are the sources of revenue that we can equip the DAO with. And there's quite a few. The first is the trading fees, like I mentioned. The pools, so the liquidity pools in the Sunday protocol will have a staking address attached, which it was kind of a big oversight in V1 to not attach a staking address. And because of a small bug in the contracts, we haven't been able to go back and add them like we intended to. But in V3, the liquidity in the protocol will be earning staking rewards, and that will count as protocol revenue. And we'll talk a bit about this separately, as there's a different fee rate for this feature called strategies. And so that's another source of protocol revenue. And then optionally, and it's going to be up to the DAO to set what this is, and it'll probably initially be 0, but in the future they could set it to a pool creation fee. So for example, it might cost 100 ADA paid to the protocol treasury to open a new pool. And so those are kind of the main sources of revenue. There are potentially others that I'm forgetting about, but we really wanted to kind of bring protocol revenue to the Sunday protocol itself, rather than just to the scoopers, and then have the DAO vote on how to spend that, right? So the DAO can say, okay, we're going to do a monthly payout of this much ADA to the scoopers for running that infrastructure, and that'll be a negotiation between the scoopers and the DAO. Yeah.
Nice breakdown there. I'm just taking a couple of notes. So you mentioned strategies as a way of potentially bringing income. We'll dive into that towards the end of this call here. You also mentioned swap fees, which I think is probably the one that everybody's most familiar with. But then you also mentioned pool creation fees. So those are just 3 of, I believe, probably many more to follow, ways for the protocol to begin to sort of build its own treasury. And then, as you mentioned, letting the community, or I believe what will be Sunday token holders, right? The ability to utilize some sort of governance platform once that's confirmed, in order to dictate exactly how that's actually spent. One thing that you mentioned there, I think, which is huge, we've seen other protocols do this as well, is staking the actual underlying liquidity in liquidity pools, right? I think it's now become something that people expect. So I'm excited to hear that Sundaeswap will be making the switch to finally put that ADA that would typically just be sitting there to work, and then providing that as an additional stream of revenue back over to the holders.
So some historical context there. That was always the plan, but we were under such an intense kind of time pressure to launch. Everybody was like expecting us to launch, and we didn't have a staking contract written. And so what we did is we wrote the contract so that they were supposed to allow the scoopers to attach a staking address later, right? It only could, when it checks that the pool has been paid back out to the contract, it's supposed to only check the payment part, and meaning the scoopers should be able to attach a staking credential. And just a small bug in that code means that that's not possible. So once you've created the pool, you can't attach a staking address. And so we kind of missed the boat on that, and that's been really frustrating. And we didn't want to deal with like having to create a separate pool and then get people to like migrate over, because that's really, really painful. So Sunday V3, you can attach a staking address. You can update that staking address. There's an explicit Treasury administrator that's in charge of updating that staking address if we want to, for example, diversify or update to a new staking script or things like that. And that Treasury administrator can be, again, a script in the future. So it could be something like, oh, show me an NFT that proves that a Sunday DAO vote for this happened. Could be the condition under which you can update that. We will probably just launch with a multi-sig for now, and then upgrade it to a script later. But just to be clear, the Treasury administrator does not have access to the actual Treasury. It's kind of a bit of a misnomer there.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm sure that would have popped up as a question here in the comments. No, so thank you for just setting the narrative straight there. Obviously taking responsibility. And yeah, just showing that, hey, you guys are here for the long term, right? You've learned from your mistakes, you're fixing things, and you're improving. One last question before we move on to the next topic is just surrounding the batchers themselves, right? So there's more protocols that are now coming out that are just kind of stepping away from batchers completely. And then some of them that are asking, for batching to be permissionless. Where does Sunday fall within this? Is Sunday going to have their own batchers, or will anybody from the community be able to set up a batcher and contribute, and then also be able to earn, given the fees that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, so Sunday Labs has never and will never run a scooper, as we call them, a batcher. That's just from a regulatory standpoint, it is too risky for us to run all of the infrastructure, right? It wouldn't be appropriate as the people who built the protocol and the people who run the kind of primary entry point to the protocol, although that's starting to diversify, for us to run a batcher or a scooper. Instead, Sunday V1 has operated with 30 elected scoopers. So there was a big vote back in October or November of 2021 that selected who the 30 scoopers would be, and those have been largely unchanged. It's always an option for the DAO to vote to add somebody new or to remove somebody, or whatever. But they there's not been a lot of strong interest in doing so yet. I imagine with Sunday V3 there may be some interest in kind of rotating out some of the less active scoopers with more active members and things like that. But our view is there are two benefits to batchers that are kind of key to the Sunday protocol that we're trying to build. One is we believe there is a strong argument that batching infrastructure is both more efficient, because there's this initial cost to just parsing your datum and parsing your redeemer and things like that, that if you do something like a sequencing where you execute one order at a time, it's always you're going to pay that n times. Whereas if you do batching, you pay that once and then you just pay a small cost for each order. And there's definitely you can construct protocols where sequencing is more efficient, and you can construct protocols where batching is more efficient. And we think that AMM DEXs are one of those conditions, or one of those scenarios where batching is better. Second, in terms of permissioned versus permissionless batching, if you enable permissionless batching, right now there is no way to guarantee that orders are executed in a first come first serve basis. Instead, everybody is racing to execute just one order and get the fees from that one order as fast as they can, or are able to selectively pick which orders to execute, meaning they can include theirs advantageously. This is called a sandwich attack. I think it's totally fine if other protocols want to build. I think diversity in the space is good. So if other protocols want to build either sequenced or open permissionless batching protocols, I think that's fine, as long as users know what the risks are there. Oh, I might be front run. I might be sandwich attacked. If I place this limit order, it might execute at exactly that price rather than what the kind of fairer price would be. And so, and that's really more to do with order books than with batching. So for right now, we see that what the Sunday protocol is kind of that fairest option, where we need that permissioning to ensure that fairness for the users, that first come first serve basis, right? And what we have done is we've put a setting in the protocol that if the DAO ever votes to flip this setting, batching will become permissionless. So we'll probably start with permissioned batching. We recommend, Sunday Labs recommends keeping it permissioned batching, just because we believe that gives it really good properties that other protocols are moving away from, that we think users will value. But we wanted to give the option to the DAO because it's, at the end of the day, we're not, I'm not King Sunday. We don't get to make that choice. It's ultimately the DAO's decision. And so we wanted to put that in their hands.
I like that nickname, King Sunday.
No, I'm not King Sunday. It's not a nickname.
No, I'm just teasing you there.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. You really just kind of broke down, I think, both sides of the equation. I think there are inherent risks with permissionless batching, as you mentioned. sandwich attacks being one of them. And I know that there's been issues with other protocols facing very similar things like that, which they've had to kind of get under control. But then I also understand the other perspective where people say, hey, we're in a decentralized, permissionless, people love that word, right, environment. We should have the ability to run these things. And so you obviously working at the ground level, I think, have the best understanding from a developer's perspective, whether that's federated or permission versus permissionless. So it sounds like you guys are prepped to be able to handle either one, which I think is the best option, right?
Yeah.
To where the community can then vote. You kind of built the platform, build the framework to go either way, and then let the DAO or the community vote. And so it's actually one thing, maybe we just kind of tack that on towards the end. It's just going to be governance, right? And just the DAO. I know you guys recently had some upgrades or some articles that were released surrounding, governance and Sunday. So I'd like to get a little bit more about that. But you did mention options and just being able to kind of move things the way that you want. So that's actually going to take us into this next step here, which is the optional pool or routing. Can you explain, what routing is, what Sunday is doing to take advantage of this in V3?
Sure. Yeah. So also, I've got to commend you on your notes. I went through these super quickly, and you took really good notes. So
Thank you.
So in the V1 protocol, you specify which pool, like a unique identifier for the pool that you want your order to execute against. And this is good because you're locking in the price, the TVL, the slippage, the fee that you're going to pay. Like, you're locking in a lot of settings, so you know what you're getting, right? But what this can lead to is sometimes users, would prefer a faster swap, or sometimes there is a swap that would give a better price than the pool that they chose, right? So like maybe something executed right before their order executes, and so the scoopers could give them a better price, but the contracts are forcing them to give them a worse price. And so what we've done is we've made that pool identifier optional. And so now, if you specify the pool, it will definitely execute against that. So if you want to kind of lock it in and make sure, you can be sure. But if you want to say, oh, just give me whatever gets me the token fastest, I'm okay with a slightly worse price. If like there's like a 20 order backlog on this pool, but no backlog on this one, just execute me against that one. So you can leave it null, and we can kind of do load balancing across pools. Or you can also leave it empty if you want. If we implement something like what a DEX aggregator would do, is say, hey, take my order and execute it against whichever pool would give me the best price. We don't currently support like partial matching. And so you can't say, take an order and split it into multiple orders across multiple different pools. But what I was mentioning earlier, where we have extensibility, we have explicitly left it so that the order contract can be updated. So if the DAO votes to switch to a different order contract or add a new order contract into the pool of order contracts that are supported, we could add partial matching or even like order book like features to the DEX. So we really wanted to kind of like this is kind of a common theme, leave our options open for where we can take the features that we develop. So yeah, that's again just a small feature that we think will really kind of open up options for people and let us build really powerful features on top of.
Thank you for that one. I don't have anything else to add to that particular one. Again, I think that you do an amazing job of just explaining that. And I think that's why people sort of gravitate towards you, especially as a developer, because you're able to very quickly and easily translate some of those more nuanced things to non-technical people or people that necessarily aren't at the technical depth that you are. So I wanted to also just kind of give you that compliment there. Now, we did talk a little bit about owners earlier, right? Specifically with like a fee. I want to make sure I'm using the right word. It was a fee manager, but let's maybe just kind of talk now about the order owners, which could also be done via a script or a multi-sig there as well.
Yeah, so we built this open source library called Acone. It's kind of a play on Aiken, but ice cream cone, that is meant to be kind of just a utility library. So useful primitives that other people might want to use. Right now, it really only has one primitive in it that we built for the Sunday v3 contracts. And it provides the ability to basically recreate native scripts in Aiken. And so you could have like a simple signature. So you say, hey, in order for this condition to be satisfied, it needs to be signed by this public key. You could have a threshold multi-signature. So you could say, oh, 3 out of 5 of these signatures have to be present on the transaction in order for it to be satisfied. Or you can have a script. So you say, hey, this script must be in the withdrawals in order for this to execute. I mean, that provides a really flexible and powerful primitive that we've used all over the Sunday protocol. So first, we use it in kind of the different administrative roles. So the setting, we call it the settings administrator, the metadata administrator, and the Treasury administrator. Each of those can be are one of these Aiken or these Acone multisigs. So we can initially we're going to set it as like a 3 of 5 multisig with Sunday team members, but down the road we might replace that with a script that says, let me check that, for example, there's an NFT that proves that we had an Agora vote on updating this parameter. Similarly, we've used it in the fee manager so that you can have a pool that the fee is managed by a 3 of 5 multisig. But you can also, we've also attached it to the orders. So now you can place an order and have the owner of that order be a multisig. So if there's a large corporation that wants to be, managing their corporate treasury and placing swaps that are fairly large, like 50,000 ADA, and they don't want to trust just one person within the company with that order, they can say, okay, this order is owned by a 3 of 5 multisig. In order to cancel it, 3 out of these 5 signatures have to cancel it to bring it back. Similarly, you can route it to the destination of your order can be an address that is a multisig. So you can say, oh, okay, the results of this swap also go back to this 3 of 5 multisig. And similarly, you can have protocol-owned orders. So if another protocol like Liquid or Optim or Butane wanted to use the protocol treasury to automatically place orders, and they had a condition that said, okay, they can be canceled after, if they don't execute within an hour, then they can be canceled. And if they're canceled, they have to be paid back to that protocol treasury. You can write that as a simple script and then attach that as the owner of the order. And so now you don't have to trust any individual human to not run away with the money. And then you can have protocols using their treasuries to, market make or to, sell off some tokens for funding or to buy back the token and things like that. So it's a really powerful primitive that, we talk a lot about protocol-owned liquidity and things like that. And this is protocol-owned orders, which we think is a really, really cool idea.
Man, there's so much here to break down. You mentioned programmability earlier, and that is, I think, what just keeps on popping up to my mind is the fact that all of this is programmable, as you mentioned, via script, right? To simply automate this, or through some sort of multi-sig, which I think is basically future-proofing the platform for governance, right? So Cardano, I'm sure you're aware, CIP-1694 is right around the corner. Everybody's been talking about governance. You've got the rise of more and more governance platforms like Clarity or even Summon DAO, as you mentioned. And I think that's just going to be the focus moving forward. Cardano's sort of touted as the most decentralized blockchain with node operators, but we're now aiming to be just decentralized overall with governance. So with that, I just keep thinking about, the fact that all of this is being done to provide support for when governance is in full effect here on Cardano. What I also love about the programmability of all this is all of this, like everything that we've talked about so far, can literally be tied together, right? So I was imagining a scenario in my head where you have some sort of corporate entity, that has some sort of business rules that say, hey, you can only execute swaps at this particular time. So they set up, a market open order with a pool that they specifically want to use, that they voted for, where, you know, there is a specific fee manager that's in place, or where there's some sort of order owner that's in place. And so I just wanted to reiterate for the viewers here, like everything we've touched on isn't just a feature on its own, but you can use all these features to basically act as parameters that fit your specific business model or whatever requirements your business has to adhere to. And so it's really, really awesome to hear that all these different pieces of the puzzle will be able to be plugged and played together, right? To create like this long sequence that satisfies some companies or some entities end goal. So yeah, I just wanted to again just highlight that there, that there's a lot going on here, but all this can actually be tied together.
Yeah, and it, you know, all of that, as exciting as it is, it's also, imagine like the complexity of making sure that it works well together, and the job that we've kind of placed on our auditors, and how difficult that's going to be for them.
Yeah, and that's actually maybe we just take a break now. So I think we've kind of run down the list. We've got, I think, some of the um, sort of more nuanced features here towards the very end. But I posed this to you earlier. You know, so Sundaeswap has been auditing other protocols,
Hmm.
smart contracts. I think one of the more notable ones is Mahen with their
Yep.
USDM contracts, where you guys basically mentioned some of the things that we're discussing now, right? Which is the programmability,
Hmm.
and then just also the transparency with their smart contracts. And they've kind of taken that back to the drawing board, and they're now working on that to deliver.
Well, and
So,
not you know, just to
mhm,
defend them a little bit, not to the drawing
yeah,
board. You know, they had a really solid protocol to start with. There was just kind of some missing features that were like, you'll have a much better time if you do this, and some, you know, small vulnerabilities that were like, hey, you know, you want to patch those up. So it's not like they had to rewrite everything from scratch.
no, I appreciate the clarification there, and I hope that that's not how people took it. But that is definitely not the focus here. I think what I really want to ask you is, with respect to Sunday, because you guys are auditors, you know, it. You mentioned earlier, you guys running your own batchers can look a little funny. You know, how are you guys going to be going through the actual auditing process? Who are you guys going to be working with to make sure that all this is bulletproof?
Yeah, so we've actually selected TX Pipe as our auditors, and they've been working with us for like 4 to 6 weeks so far, and we've been really enjoying that. Now, as auditors ourselves, we, you know, already have that like really critical eye, and we've already got those contracts to a really solid place. But it kind of just goes to show that you should always, you know, get an audit, because even with our depth of experience and our like really detail focused eye, there are things that, you know, we missed. And so that most of it, you know, honestly, most of their findings have been performance suggestions. So, you know, helping us push, you know, we got it to maybe 32 orders on our own, and they've helped us push it just that little bit further to 35. But there's also been at least one critical vulnerability that they caught, that we're really glad for that. So they are absolute superstars. You know, there's uh, so you're absolutely right. We would never audit our own contracts, unless they were like absurdly simple. But yeah, we're really excited to have them doing our audit.
Thank you for that. I think that was sort of a nice break with the long list of features that
Yeah.
we've been walking through. Let's jump into the next one here as we get near towards the end, which is the order extension. Do you mind explaining what that is and how that helps the Cardano community?
Sure. So, you know, a common theme in everything that I've been saying has been we really uh, have suffered from being locked into one set of contracts for the last 2 years. And so we put a lot of thought into how do we safely allow new contracts to be introduced into the system. And so one way that can happen is we can define new pool types that the DAO can vote on and say, okay, this is another contract that we consider to be a liquidity pool. And then the scoopers can execute against that. And some examples of what we might use that for are, you know, a stablecoin swap or a margin trading pool, which I know you want to talk about in a bit. I did warn you that I can, you know, fill a whole hour with Sunday V3, um, but we also want to be able to update the order contract, right? So, for example, we could now build a new order contract that is a fill or kill order. So if it doesn't execute in a, you know, in a 5-minute time span, then it can't execute. And we add that additional condition onto the order contract and make the scoopers aware of it. And so then they know, okay, I'm going to include this if it can fill. Otherwise, I'm going to not try to include it. And we can add, things like an expiring order. So, if this doesn't execute within the first 3 months, we can execute or add orders that can only be canceled under other conditions, right? Like, this can't be canceled for the first 20 minutes or things like that. We can make more efficient versions of the order contract. So right now, we've optimized them pretty heavily, but maybe we'll find even more ways to optimize it and fit even more orders into the batch. Then, we can update and introduce a new, more efficient order contract. Even simple things like I want to attach arbitrary data to the order. So we have a field in there that you can attach arbitrary data to, and that's where you would configure these new order contracts. So you could say, here's the expiration time. But if you just want to attach like an invoice number into that data to help with your tracking, or for example, maybe you're making a game and you want to use Sunday as the ability to like trade in game, you can attach the like player information in there, or the XY coordinates of that trading post, or whatever it is, that the pool, because it ignores that field, it's not going to break the contract. And so we really wanted that kind of ability to extend and this analogy of having it be a toolbox in other people's or a tool in other people's toolbox that they can reach for to build the protocols that they want to build is really important to us.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have spent a lot of time really bringing a ton of new options to users, not necessarily forcing it upon them, but as you mentioned, giving them the tools to where it's there if they want to go and take advantage of them. Now, as we get closer towards the end, we're going to be focusing on different types of orders, which I think some of them, at least one of them, has been somewhat seen. But there's two that I've yet to see anywhere else, which I think are really going to pique more interest and potentially become the norm moving forward. So I'll turn it over to you to kind of jump through them in any sort of order. But
Sure.
what we discussed earlier was the donation order. So maybe we start off with that, and then we'll wrap up there with the other two.
Sure. So there are 6 total order types in Sunday v3 compared to the 3 in Sunday v1. The 3 basic ones: swap, deposit, withdraw. Those are staying. Basically, nothing changes with those. They work the same way that they did, except just more efficiently. They can execute more in a batch and things like that. We have this new order type. So one of the new order types is called donation. And what this does is it is kind of like a deposit, but it doesn't give back any LP tokens. So you say, hey, here is 100 ADA, just deposit it into the pool. Now, an end user probably never wants to do that, right? Like maybe a user wants to kind of donate to a project, but what this really is for other projects to use, like I said, as a tool. And it allows you to, for example, build this like an incentive program where if you want, for example, somebody could say, hey, we're going to take 10% of our revenue on a recurring basis every month and just pay it into a donation into the ADA project token pool. So maybe Dex Hunter does this, for example, where they say, 10% of the revenue that we make from swaps is going to go into a donation into the ADA Hunt pool. And what that does is it basically is a really, really easy way for them to distribute pro rata, in proportion to the liquidity providers of that pool, right? Because everybody owns a percentage, and if some assets get deposited into the pool, they own a percentage of those assets. And so we see it as being this really cool mechanism for other protocols to kind of build their incentive programs without having to have all this off-chain infrastructure for claiming and distributing rewards and things like that. So that's one order type. Any questions about that one?
I think very quickly, there's been talks about tax season. I'm in the United States, so tax season is full-fledged right now. I would maybe love to hear, and again, I know you're not a tax expert, but about maybe some of the potential implications of being able to actually use this as somewhat of an actual donation, right? I know it's the name of the order type, but if you're donating, I'm wondering if that can somehow or some way be used as a potential write-off. So that I think would be an interesting thing to maybe just kind of keep an eye on as maybe you speak with more of the legal personnel. But I don't know. What are your thoughts surrounding being able to use this as an actual donation and a write-off for tax season?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point of like as we start to see more charity-based tokens, for example, right? So tokens that are really geared towards supporting some charitable cause, users could absolutely donate ADA or that charity token into the liquidity pool um, as a way that could be, the primary liquidity provider is going to be the project, and so that's a way for them to kind of generate revenue in the other direction, right? So yeah, it's a really really good point. Whether in different jurisdiction tax law that's going to count as an actual donation to a charitable cause, who knows, right? But at least providing those primitives that can be used by people if the law does kind of align to allow that to be considered a charitable donation could be really interesting too.
Yeah, no, I think that's the theme of all this is just the options that people have.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to get in your way any longer. Let's jump into this next order type.
Yeah, so the next order type is called Oracle. And I want to be clear, we're not building an Oracle, right? So uh, building an Oracle and having a robust Oracle system for your protocol is really important. It involves a lot of things, a lot of like how do you aggregate multiple data points so that you're not biased by one particular price swing or whatever. But we do provide an order type called Oracle that is a can be a component in a larger kind of Oracle-like system. And so what this does is, um, so imagine I'm building a lending protocol and I want to know the price of this token. And I want to use some on-chain data as, one data point that I'm aggregating from like, okay, here's the off-chain price, here's the on-chain price. I'm going to take their median or their average or whatever, right? One thing I can do is I can include the pool UTXO as a reference input. The problem is that pool UTXO is getting constantly spent. And so, especially if you're asking a user to sign a transaction, their transaction is going to be invalid almost immediately, right? And so they're going to have this really frustrating experience. This is, the contention problem that we saw very early on in some protocols testnets, and some protocols still suffer from and have good solutions too, but can be really frustrating to like, oh well, I went through the process of like clicking the buttons on my hardware wallet, and the transaction's invalid because the UTXO that I was referencing already got spent. And so what the Oracle order type allows you to do is to say, okay, I'm going to pass through the pool and grab a snapshot and kind of set aside a UTXO that has a snapshot of the price and the circulating LP tokens. And that UTXO is under your control now and isn't going to get spent until you spend it. And it has an NFT that kind of proves its authenticity. The NFT could only get minted as part of passing through and actually witnessing what the order type, what the value of that pool is. And so then you can build either as a user you can build your transaction referencing that, and then go and execute your liquidation or whatever it is, or you can build 100 users referencing that one transaction, and then once all of those users you're sure that they've moved on, you can spend it and maybe get an updated price. So it's this like composable component again that other protocols can use to build much better user experiences if they need this kind of like price feed data from a DEX.
And
You can
that would
also use it to
ensure.
calculate the value of LP tokens, right? Because it
Mhm.
includes the circulating LP tokens. And so if you want to, like, for example, offer, like, calculate how much ADA and like project token is this worth, it gives you the mechanism to at least estimate that.
Mhm, mhm. And also, again, ensuring that when you are ready to make the swap, that there isn't some sort of failure there. I will say that that was a little bit more on the technical side, right? But I
Yeah, for
can see some
sure.
of the benefits on that one. Can you jump into the last order type, which I think brings a lot of benefit for the Cardano community?
Yeah, so this is maybe the feature that we're most excited about, as the options that it provides. And this is an order type that we call strategies. And it's a bit hard to understand at first, but basically what it does is it allows you to defer the details of your order until later. So you lock up, say, 10,000 ADA into an order, and it doesn't have any details, right? The scooper can't execute it because it doesn't know, is it swapping for Sunday or for LQ? It doesn't know what the limit price is. It doesn't even know, is this a swap or a deposit? It doesn't know if it's a donation or it doesn't know anything about how to execute the order except who owns it and where the results need to be sent. And then at a later date, it allows you. So one thing that you specify when you lock this up is, okay, I'm not telling you details of the order, but I will tell you that as long as the details are signed by this public key, I may communicate them to you later. And so what that allows you to do is say, okay, I don't know what order I'm going to execute right now. I'm kind of waiting for some trigger condition, but I want it to be ready to go as soon as that trigger condition is hit. So it's sitting there in the order waiting to execute. And then out of band to the scooper, I communicate, hey, I want to execute this order. And then the scooper can say, okay, well, yeah, let me check the signature and let me present that signed strategy execution, we call it, to the contract. The contract checks the signature, checks the expiration time on those details, and then says, oh, this was a limit order for the Sunday token all along. Let me go ahead and execute that. And this allows a lot of like really powerful things to be built. So you can implement dollar cost averaging where you say, okay, I'm going to place 10,000 ADA into an order owned by me and paid back into the order contract at the end. And then once a month, I'm going to give you the signed details to say, okay, go ahead and execute this, like swapping 100 of that ADA for Sunday or for whatever token that you want. And then it'll execute that swap. It'll get, 100 ADA worth of that other token and pay the remaining ADA, the 9,999 or whatever it is, ADA, plus the result of your swap into the destination. Now that destination is the order contract ready to go again, all primed and ready to fire again. And so you can just do that once per month and slowly dollar cost average that token. Or you can have a trailing stop loss where you say, hey, the price is going up and I don't want to miss out on these gains, but I kind of want to lock in these the gains that I am getting. And so I want a stop loss that walks upward with the price of the token. And so if it ever drops by 10%, then I'm going to trigger and I'm going to sell. But as long as it keeps going up, I'm not going to sell. And the way you do that is you lock the tokens that you want to sell into the order, and then you're monitoring. You run a program that monitors, and when that condition is hit, whatever the condition is for you, in this case, a trailing stop loss, you build the limit sell order and you send it to the scoopers. We're planning on using something like a decentralized communication network like Noster to broadcast that information to the scoopers. Yeah, so this is like once you start thinking in this way, you can just keep pulling that thread on the sweater and it's going to completely unravel in terms of like everything that you can do. You could, roll some dice to decide what token you're going to buy if you wanted like some kind of like randomized lottery based trading strategy. You could have a chat GPT powered sentiment analysis of Twitter conversations to decide which token you're going to buy. It like is a really, really, really powerful primitive. Now, we expect, the average end user isn't going to download and run a program on their computer to execute these strategies. And so what it will most likely look like is somebody like Dex Hunter or somebody else in the ecosystem saying, hey, if you place this order and put our public key in here, we'll manage this strategy for you, kind of like a managed strategy offering. So the user doesn't have to put their own public key. They can put somebody they trust's public key there. Now, the person that they're trusting, it's not full custody because the order is still owned by you. They can't cancel the order and take the funds for themselves. And the destination is specified by you. And so they can't change where the result of the swap gets executed. And this is where that optional order or that optional pool routing comes into play, because you can also say, I'm only interested in trading against this specific pool, so they can't go and execute against, some random meme coin. They're really like locked into, buying and selling indie for you. So it's not full custody, but it is an elevated level of trust. So we do caution people to like know what you're getting into if somebody is claiming to use this feature, and always be careful about who you trust and things like that. So I do want to kind of acknowledge some of the inspiration for this. So this, many who are familiar with the ecosystem, this is very similar to Axo's programmable swaps. We think that what they've built is really impressive and it inspired this. And we're just making different trade-offs that we think fit better for the Sunday protocol. So for example, one of the concerns we had about the programmable swap model is that the way that it works is defining this whole domain-specific language for defining your orders on chain, which certainly provides more security to make sure that your order executes according to the conditions that you set up. But that's a huge surface area for potential bugs. It's a huge new thing that people have to learn how to use and how to operate. It's really unfamiliar. So like, for example, our approach, you can write strategies in any programming language you want, whereas in Axo, there's obviously this very specific programming language for it. I forgot what I was going to say. But so, I just want to emphasize they served as some inspiration. It's not quite the same thing. We made specific trade-offs that we think fit better for the Sunday protocol, but we think what Axo has built is also really cool. And so, I know there's a lot of like tribalism or a lot of anger. I'm not trying to put theirs down. I'm not trying to say ours is better. It's just better for the Sunday protocol, we believe.
No, very nice way to put it. Huge shout out to the Axo team. I've actually been releasing more content surrounding what they've built out. And I think that they've really just made an impact here in upping the level of expectation with DEXs on Cardano. And I think you guys are now also stepping up and doing the same thing. There's just been so many protocols. And of course, I think a lot of it was due to some of the restrictions with Plutus V1, with just how much was able to be done. But as the protocol, and I'm talking about Cardano, matures, we're also seeing the platforms that built on top of Cardano also maturing. And I think that this is just another way of Sundaeswap showing, hey, we've put the time in to think and really figure out the best ways to get back to the community. So with respect to the strategy, I believe personally that this is definitely the most impactful tool that we've discussed so far. I also like to hear about the third-party involvement. Of course, that comes with a little bit of risk. And as you mentioned, nothing can actually happen to the user's funds unless it's agreed upon by whatever signing key was used to actually create the strategy in the first place. So there is an element of security, which you obviously want to be careful when you're giving sort of any be careful when you're giving any sort of authority to a third party to be able to interact with that strategy. Because again, as you mentioned, it's somewhat of a blank slate that you may not have all the details too early on, but you can use some sort of other outside information to be able to dictate what happens with that swap moving forward. And so really interesting to hear there, Pi. I guess I just want to maybe just kind of close this off by asking, is there any sort of other features that you want to lay down here for the Cardano community as we get ready to close this down?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and I'm sure that I've forgotten some. We used up an hour and a half regardless. So we're releasing our white paper today. That's the first tweet I'm going to make right after we finish this. But So go read the white paper if you're interested. We go quite in depth into how these features work, even some nitty-gritty details about optimizations if that's kind of your cup of tea.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Pi Laningham here, founder of Sundaeswap, bringing V3. I guess I have to ask this, and I'm not sure how I forgot about this earlier. When mainnet? When can we expect to see this on mainnet?
Yeah, so the answer that I've kind of taken to giving to this question for the last 2 years is, I'm allergic to timelines. We have found that it is just a way to breed contentment within your community, because you say one thing and software is really hard to predict, and so when it inevitably changes, people just get upset and angry. And so we really like to focus more on what we have already accomplished or what we've already built, so we don't start talking about something until we've got something to show for it. And so that's why I was really careful not to reveal a lot of these features too early, because who knows if the auditors would come back and say, well, that one's actually really unsound, you've got to axe it, or things like that. In terms of timeline, I'm not going to give a specific date until we're 100% confident in it, but obviously relatively soon. We're in audit. We have we're open sourcing the code very soon, so people can go and look at how much is done. We've done our preview testnet. It's really just that spit and polish and a few extra features that we need to implement before we can go live.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, Pi Laningham breaking down all the upcoming features included in the V3 launch of Sundaeswap. If you guys have not already checked this out on the preview test, and I'll go ahead and leave the link to it down below, it is available at app.v3.preview.sunday.fi. I've definitely checked it out. I've enjoyed it. To be fully transparent, not every single liquidity pool does utilize the V3 contract. So make sure that you're keeping an eye out and making sure that you're utilizing the right tokens on the preview network in order to take advantage of those brand new speed and scalability features.
I will also say the V3, it's constantly under development. We're adding new features to the scooper. We're fixing bugs. We're introducing new bugs. So, the stability may be a little bit less than what you would expect on mainnet. So just have some grace and understanding if your order isn't going through or whatever.
Yep. And that's the reason why it is a testnet, right? It's an environment for new things to be deployed, for the community to get a taste of what's there, and for the community to also potentially break things before they come onto mainnet. So that will do it here for today's video. Again, a little bit longer than usual, but I definitely found this to be extremely insightful for myself. I've learned about so many different types of features, and I've got very high expectations now, now that King Sunday has broken down so many things for us here. No, I want to again just thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys did enjoy today's chat, please make sure to smash that thumbs up. If it's your first time stopping by Dapp Central and you want more content like this, breaking down all the different builders here in Cardano, consider subscribing to the channel. And last but not least, if you have any questions for me or Pi surrounding any of the 10 to 12 features that we've discussed today, then please make sure to go ahead and leave a comment down below. That said, we'll see you guys in the next video.